January the 26th, 1945. The Colmar Pocket, France. A single American soldier stands alone on a burning tank destroyer, his fuel tanks seconds from exploding beneath his feet. Around him, 600 yards of frozen forest crawl with German infantry, 250 men, maybe more. Machine gun fire tears through the air, mortars scream overhead. Any rational person would run. But Audie Murphy doesn't run. The kid they laughed at. The orphan who couldn't afford shoes. The boy the Marines rejected for being too scrawny. The teenager the paratroopers dismiss without a second glance. That boy, just 19 years old, weighing barely 100 pounds, grabs the .50 caliber machine gun on that flaming death trap and makes a choice that will echo through American history forever. For 1 full hour, he holds back an entire German company. Alone. Standing on a vehicle engulfed in flames that could vaporize him any second. This isn't Hollywood fantasy. This isn't wartime propaganda. Every impossible second actually happened. This is how the unlikeliest warrior America ever produced, a dirt-poor sharecropper's son from Hunt County, Texas, who stood 5'5" in his boots, became the most decorated combat soldier in United States military history. 33 medals, every major valor award America could give. From a kid, 3 branches of the military said wasn't good enough to wear the uniform. But before that frozen battlefield, where one Texas teenager rewrote the rules of human courage, we need to understand where he came from. Because Audie Murphy's impossible bravery wasn't born in training camps or forged in battle. It was hammered into existence in a childhood so brutal that facing death might have seemed easier than facing another day of survival. Hunt County, Texas, 1925. The kind of godforsaken nowhere that doesn't make history books. Just cotton fields stretching to horizons, dust bowl poverty, and families trapped in cycles designed to keep them desperate. Audie Leon Murphy entered the world June 20th in a sharecropper's shack with gaps in the walls wide enough to see daylight through. His parents already had 6 kids. Audie was number 7 of 12. 12 mouths to feed on land they'd never own. The math was simple and vicious. Work someone else's land, grow someone else's cotton, watch the landowner take his share, the company store take theirs, and end each year deeper in debt than you started. That was sharecropping. That was Audie's inheritance. By 5, he picked cotton until his fingers bled. By 8, he could manage £100 daily. Not impressive, just necessary to justify the food he ate. School became impossible. He made 5th grade before the fields claimed him permanently. Not because he was dumb, everyone said the boy had an unnervingly sharp mind, but because choosing between education and eating isn't really a choice. His father Emmett was a man broken by circumstance, hardened beyond softness. When he abandoned the family in 1940, some kids felt relief more than loss. But his mother Josie, thin, exhausted, worn down by childbirth and endless labour, maintained impossible reserves of tenderness. She sang hymns, told stories, held them when hunger made sleep impossible. Audie worshipped her with the desperate intensity only truly deprived children understand. Around 10, someone gave him an old rifle. He discovered something extraordinary. He could shoot. Not just shoot, he could hit impossible targets. Squirrels, rabbits, deer when luck allowed. That rifle became the difference between starvation and survival. He'd vanish into woods before dawn, moving through trees with eerie silence, learning to make single bullets count because there was no money for wasted shots. Other boys played. Audie hunted. It wasn't a hobby, it was a job keeping his siblings fed. Something strange happened during those hunts. When pressure mounted, when shots mattered most, Audie became calmer, quieter. That unnatural composure under stress would matter later in ways nobody could predict. 41 shattered everything. Josie collapsed in the fields. She'd hidden sickness for months because stopping meant starvation. By the time anyone acknowledged how sick she was, nothing could save her. She died, leaving 16-year-old Audie responsible for younger siblings he couldn't possibly support. The grief was physical. His mother, the only person who'd consistently loved him, was gone. He tried everything. Picked cotton, fixed radios, pumped gas. But jobs were scarce for teenage boys with fifth-grade educations in Depression-era Texas. His siblings scattered, relatives, foster care, orphanages. Audie blamed himself completely. Decades later, wearing 33 medals, he'd still call this his greatest failure. Not any battlefield moment. His inability to keep his family together after his mother died. That failure carved something permanent into him. Maybe it explained what came next, the willingness to die protecting others. When you've already failed protecting the people you love most, your own death stops meaning much. December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor. Audie heard about the Japanese attack on a store radio in Greenville. America was going to war. The military offered 3 meals daily, a bed, $30 monthly he could send his siblings. For someone who'd known real hunger, that sounded like salvation. He walked into the Marine Corps recruiting office with nothing left to lose. The recruiter looked at him 5 seconds. "Sorry, son. Marines have standards." Audie stood there, 5'5", maybe 100 pounds, and the recruiter saw a child, not a Marine. He tried explaining he could shoot, that appearances deceived. The recruiter wasn't interested. Next. The paratroopers rejected him next. Then the army turned him away. 3 times. 3 separate military branches looked at Audie Murphy and said the same thing. Too small, too weak, too young. Not good enough. Most people would have quit, found factory work, returned to the fields. But Audie Murphy had learned something in those brutal Texas cotton fields that military recruiters couldn't see on his scrawny frame. He'd learned that quitting meant dying, and he'd already survived things that should have killed him. The army would eventually accept him, barely, in 1942. They lowered standards to fill quotas, reluctantly taking the skinny Texas kid nobody else wanted. They had no idea what they were getting. January 26, 1945, near Holtzwihr, France. Temperature just above freezing. Company B, 15th Infantry Regiment, was pushing to clear German positions from a wooded area. Lieutenant Audie Murphy commanded roughly 130 exhausted understrength men. It started badly. German artillery opened up with surgical precision, pre-sighted positions, observers who knew every metre of ground, shells burst in trees, sending shrapnel and wood splinters tearing through the formation. Men dropped. The concussive force felt like invisible fists punching through bodies. Audie made the tactical call. Withdraw to a better position, not retreat, strategic withdrawal. There's a difference when you're saving what's left of your command. They fell back to an abandoned tank destroyer. Mechanical failure had disabled it earlier. Useless as a vehicle, but it still had ammunition for the .50 caliber machine gun in the turret. Audie positioned his remaining men in defensive positions behind the destroyer and in nearby ditches. Then German infantry emerged from the tree line, not probing. Full assault, company strength, 200 to 250 men in tactical formation designed to overwhelm a weakened position. The Americans opened fire, rifles, machine guns, but the Germans kept coming. They had numbers, momentum. This wasn't a firefight. This was annihilation in progress. Audie recognised the math instantly. His defensive line wouldn't hold. Too few men, too much ground. The Germans would flank them in minutes and Company B would be destroyed. He looked at the disabled tank destroyer, at the .50 caliber machine gun. That gun could shred an infantry assault, but using it meant climbing onto the destroyer, exposing himself completely, standing in the open while 250 enemy soldiers shot at him, and there was smoke coming from the fuel tanks. The thing could explode any second. Audie Murphy climbed up anyway. The M2 Browning .50 caliber machine gun fires rounds the size of a man's finger at 2,900 feet per second. 9 rounds per second when the trigger's pulled. Each bullet carries enough energy to tear through multiple targets. He opened fire. The German assault staggered. Men dropped. The formation wavered. But there were so many. They spread out, tried flanking, returned fire from multiple positions. Bullets snapped past his head, kicked up dirt around the destroyer, pinged off metal. Audie ignored them. Swung the machine gun methodically, firing controlled bursts, creating overlapping fields of fire the Germans couldn't penetrate. His men watched from their positions, unable to believe what they were seeing. Their lieutenant stood completely exposed on a potentially exploding vehicle, calmly operating a machine gun against an entire company. It looked like suicide. It was working. Every time Germans tried advancing, Audie cut them down. He'd switch targets rapidly, hit a machine gun crew setting up, swing to infantry flanking, back to suppress a centre rush. His shooting was precise, economical, no wasted motion. Smoke thickened. The damaged fuel system was getting worse. Men below shouted at him to get down. The thing was going to blow. Audie didn't respond. His entire focus stayed on the Germans. They brought up mortars. Rounds dropped around the destroyer, close enough that Audie felt the concussion. Shrapnel tore his uniform, drew blood. He didn't stop shooting. He also called in artillery, while operating the machine gun, while under fire from 250 enemies, while standing on a burning vehicle. He'd call coordinates, shoot, adjust fire, shoot again, multitasking that should have been cognitively impossible under that stress. But Audie's mind in combat didn't work like normal people's. Extreme stress that shut down most cognitive function made him sharper. Flames became visible from the fuel system. Heat waves shimmered. His men screamed at him to abandon it. Audie stayed, because the moment he climbed down, Germans would advance, would overrun his position, would kill or capture everyone in Company B. So he made a decision. He was willing to burn, willing to be blown apart, because that was preferable to watching his company get destroyed. That's not courage in any normal sense. That's something beyond normal frameworks for understanding human behaviour. 1 hour, 1 full hour of continuous combat, exposed to enemy fire, standing on a literally burning vehicle with no cover except the machine gun in his hands. 1 hour, American reinforcements finally arrived. Tanks, fresh infantry. The Germans saw them coming and withdrew. The assault that should have destroyed Company B had failed. Only then did Audie Murphy climb down. His men swarmed him, couldn't believe he was alive. His uniform was torn, bloody, burned. His hands were blistered from the hot gun. His ears bled from concussion. He was shaking, adrenaline dump catching up. "You okay, Lieutenant?" Audie looked around, did a quick count. Most of his men were alive. The position held. "Yeah," he said. "I'm okay." Then he collapsed. When his superiors heard what happened, they didn't believe it. Lieutenant Murphy claimed he'd held off an entire German company alone for an hour on a burning tank destroyer. But every soldier in Company B told the same story, and the German casualty count, 50 dead, many wounded, confirmed it. The army awarded him the Medal of Honor. But the question haunting everyone who knew the story wasn't about medals. It was simpler. How does a human being do that? Camp Walters, Texas. Summer 1942. The army took one look at Private Audie Murphy and immediately regretted their decision. Basic training was designed to break healthy young men in their prime. Audie weighed 112 pounds soaking wet. The obstacle courses destroyed him. He finished last in almost everything physical, climbing walls, crawling under wire, running with full packs. His legs were too short, his frame too small, his reserves too shallow. But here's what his drill instructors noticed. He never quit, never complained, never made excuses. While bigger men collapsed from exhaustion, cursing the heat and the pain, Audie just kept going. Silent, determined, almost mechanical. He'd survived worse. Picking cotton in 100-degree Texas summers for 12 hours straight made basic training almost comfortable by comparison. Then came the rifle range. Everything changed. The skinny kid who struggled with every physical test picked up an M1 Garand and became someone else entirely. His breathing steadied, his hands stopped shaking, and he started hitting targets other recruits couldn't even see clearly. Not just hitting them, centering them, from distances that should have been difficult for trained soldiers. The range instructors exchanged looks. This scrawny teenager who looked like a strong wind might blow him over could shoot like men who'd hunted their entire lives. Well, he had hunted his entire life, just squirrels instead of targets. The instructors started watching him differently, noticed how pressure affected him opposite from normal people. When drills suddenly shifted to simulated combat chaos, instructors screaming, blank rounds firing, smoke everywhere, most recruits panicked. Audie got quieter, more focused. Like chaos filtered away, everything except what mattered. That's not something you can teach. That's wiring, and Audie's wiring was different. July 1943, Sicily, Operation Husky. The 3rd Infantry Division hit Italian beaches, and 19-year-old Private Murphy experienced combat for the first time. The sensory assault should have paralysed him. Explosions, screaming, the metallic taste of fear. Some men shut down completely. Others found reserves they didn't know existed. Audie stayed calm, not fearless. He felt terror like everyone else. But fear didn't control him, didn't make him freeze or panic. It sharpened his focus. His platoon leader noticed immediately. This kid moved right, used cover properly, didn't waste ammunition, and when he fired, enemy soldiers dropped. Combat reveals who people really are, faster than anything else. Some tough-talking soldiers fell apart. Some quiet ones became iron. Audie Murphy, the reject 3 military branches didn't want, turned out to be built for this nightmare. Within weeks, his reputation grew. Soldiers requested assignment to his unit, not because he was likeable. He remained quiet, almost cold, but because he kept people alive. When Murphy led patrols, you had better odds of coming home. Sicily, Salerno, Anzio, Naples. Each battle blurred into the next. Audie killed enemy soldiers with efficiency that was almost mechanical. His superiors kept promoting him, private to PFC, corporal, sergeant. Each promotion recognised what everyone saw. This undersized Texan was exceptional at the only things infantry combat values, killing enemies and protecting friendlies. The medals started accumulating. Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Stars, Bronze Stars. He accepted them with the same flat demeanour he accepted everything else. No speeches, no false modesty, just acknowledgement and back to work. But there was a cost nobody saw yet. Audie watched friends die. Men he trained with, joked with, made plans with. There, one moment, alive, talking, dreaming about home, and gone the next. Artillery, snipers, mines, combat didn't care about potential or friendship. Each death left marks. He became quieter, more isolated. The boy from Texas who'd cried when his mother died was being replaced by something else, something necessary for survival, but dangerous for souls. By January 1945, Audie Murphy was a second lieutenant with a battlefield commission, 20 years old, 18 months of continuous combat, multiple decorations. He'd killed more enemy soldiers than most men would in entire wars. His unit trusted him completely. When Lieutenant Murphy said move, you moved. When he said stay down, you stayed down. Because Murphy's judgment had been proven right so many times that following his orders stopped feeling like obedience and started feeling like survival instinct. But everything, all the training, all the combat, all the medals and promotions and hard-earned respect, was preparation for one moment. One impossible hour that would define his life and defy every rule of human capability. January 26, 1945. The Colmar Pocket, a disabled tank destroyer, 250 German soldiers, and one skinny kid from Texas who simply refused to die. June 1945. General Alexander Patch draped the pale blue ribbon of the Medal of Honor around Audie Murphy's neck. Photographers captured everything. Newsreels played in theatres nationwide. The skinny kid from Texas had become America's most decorated soldier. 33 medals, every major valor award the nation could bestow. He felt nothing, or worse, he felt wrong. The medals felt like weights, not honours. Each one represented moments he couldn't forget, men he couldn't save, decisions haunting his sleep. People wanted celebration, wanted him proud. Instead, Audie felt hollow, disconnected, like watching someone else's life from a distance. The war ended. The army sent him home to Texas, back to a place that felt less like home and more like a museum of painful memories. His mother still dead, siblings still scattered, the shack where he'd grown up falling apart. Nothing had changed except him, and he'd changed in ways that made normal life impossible. The nightmares started immediately, every night, sometimes multiple times. He'd wake gasping, covered in sweat, reaching for weapons that weren't there. Vivid recreations of combat, explosions, gunfire, men dying. Sometimes the tank destroyer exploded in his dreams. Sometimes his mother appeared in combat zones he couldn't protect her from. Sleep became something to fear. He'd stay awake as long as possible. Coffee, reading, anything to avoid the dreams. When exhaustion finally forced sleep, nightmares came. He'd wake violent, disoriented, once nearly hurting someone who tried waking him gently. In 1945, they didn't call it PTSD. They called it shell shock, or combat fatigue, or nothing at all. Real men were supposed to handle it. Audie Murphy, America's greatest warrior, couldn't handle civilian life, and that failure shamed him more than anything in combat. A Hollywood talent scout saw his picture on a magazine cover, saw the medals, the story, the face that somehow still looked boyish, offered him a screen test. Audie, desperate for something to give his life structure, said yes. Hollywood was surreal, completely disconnected from anything he'd experienced, but it offered escape, a chance to pretend to be someone else. Surprisingly, he was decent at it. The camera liked him. Audiences were fascinated watching a real war hero play soldiers. But Audie Murphy did something radical in the 1950s, something heroes weren't supposed to do. He started talking publicly about his struggles, about the nightmares, the insomnia, the times he woke reaching for guns, the hypervigilance making normal social situations exhausting. He spoke about these things not for attention, but because he knew other veterans were suffering silently, ashamed to admit they couldn't just get over the war. His advocacy made a difference. Not immediately. The 1950s stigmatized mental health severely, but he planted seeds, made it slightly more acceptable for veterans to seek help, gave strong men permission to admit they were struggling. He married twice. The first marriage collapsed. His nightmares, his temper, his inability to connect emotionally made intimacy nearly impossible. The second marriage to Pamela Archer in 1951 lasted, though it wasn't easy. She learned to wake him carefully, learned to recognise bad days, learned to give him space when needed. They had 2 sons. Audie loved them fiercely but struggled with fatherhood. His childhood provided no template for healthy parenting, and his PTSD meant unpredictability, distance. But he tried, made sure his boys had what he never had: stability, education, opportunities. Money was always problematic. Despite his movie career, Audie never managed finances well. He gambled, made bad investments, loaned money to friends who never repaid him. He couldn't hold on to wealth, maybe because wealth had never been part of his identity. He also developed dependency on sleeping pills. The only way to manage nightmares was through medication. Doctors prescribed them freely in the 1950s without understanding addiction risks. Audie became dependent, needing pills to sleep, then needing more as tolerance built. But through everything, the PTSD, the insomnia, the financial struggles, the medication dependency, Audie maintained something essential: responsibility. He showed up for veterans' events, responded to letters from soldiers, used his platform for causes he believed in. Even when his own life was falling apart, he tried helping others. The 1960s brought new challenges. His movie career faded as westerns lost popularity, money got tighter, bills accumulated. He started making questionable business deals with people who saw him as a useful name more than a person. Through it all, the nightmares continued. The hypervigilance continued. The disconnection from normal human experience continued. Combat had broken something that never fully healed. The most decorated American soldier was also one of its most damaged survivors. May 28, 1971. Audie Murphy boarded a private plane near Roanoke, Virginia. The weather was bad, rain, low visibility. The pilot probably should have delayed. The plane crashed into Brush Mountain. Everyone aboard died instantly. Audie Murphy was 46 years old. The funeral at Arlington National Cemetery drew thousands. Full military honours, presidential condolences, fellow veterans wept. Everything a hero's funeral should be. But the true measure of Audie Murphy's life wasn't the medals or movies or public mourning. It was quieter. Veterans started writing about how Audie's openness about PTSD had given them permission to seek help, how his advocacy had made it easier to admit struggling, how his willingness to be vulnerable despite being the ultimate tough guy mattered more than combat accomplishments. The VA, slowly, began recognising combat trauma as legitimate medical condition requiring treatment. The seeds Audie planted in the 1950s finally bore fruit. PTSD became an official diagnosis in 1980. Veterans started getting treatment instead of shame. Audie Murphy didn't live to see that recognition. But his advocacy contributed to it. His grave at Arlington became one of the most visited, not just by military history enthusiasts, but by veterans. They'd stand there quietly, sometimes leaving tokens, coins, medals, notes, paying respects not to the hero, but to the fellow sufferer. The man who admitted that survival didn't mean okay, that coming home didn't mean healed, because that's ultimately what Audie Murphy's story reveals. Courage isn't just standing on burning tank destroyers, it's also admitting when you're broken, seeking help when you need it, continuing to function when everything inside screams to stop. The kid from Texas, who was too small, too weak, too poor, became a symbol, not just of military valor, though he exemplified that, but of something more complex. The cost of war, the price of survival, the long struggle continuing after shooting stops. People still ask, how did he do it? But maybe the better question is, what did it cost him? Audie Murphy saved Company B that day in France, saved over 100 men who went home to families and futures because he refused to climb down. But he couldn't save himself, couldn't find peace, couldn't escape the memories and nightmares and weight of medals that felt more like anchors than honours. His life teaches us that heroism is real, but complicated. That courage doesn't prevent trauma, that you can do impossible things and still struggle with depression, that the strongest person you know might be fighting battles you can't see. Audie Murphy was too weak for war, they said, too small, too young, too unlikely. They were wrong about everything except this. He was too young to see what he saw, to do what he did, to carry what he carried for his too short life. But he did it anyway, and we remember, not just the hour in hell, but the lifetime of struggling afterward. Both were heroic, both deserve honour. 10 tar Novament,